By the time the judge asked my daughter-in-law why she had been planning for lawsuit money before I ever refused her, I had already lost something worth more than $600,000. My son no longer sat beside me. The courtroom microphone gave a soft pop when Judge Keller leaned forward. Paper rasped under his hand. The wooden rail beneath my palm felt polished and cold, and somebody nearby had brought in coffee strong enough that I could smell it over the dusty heat coming from the floor vent. "Mrs. Sullivan," the judge said, "I want to be precise. This email is dated before the conversation you say caused the dispute. What litigation proceeds were you anticipating?" Vanessa sat in the witness chair in a cream jacket I had seen at Christmas dinner. Her attorney shifted. My son Brian stared at the enlarged email on the monitor, then at his wife. He looked at the date again. That was the moment I knew Brian had found something in the case that he hadn't expected to find. "My name is Patrick Sullivan. I was 63, a retired commercial contractor who still did consulting work around Chicago when I felt like taking a project. I had spent most of my adult life reading contracts before signing them. Yet the document that put me in that courtroom began with a sentence I had once typed to my own son. To understand why that sentence mattered, you have to go back several months, to the night Brian slid a mortgage packet across my kitchen table. The folder struck my coffee mug with a dull tap. "What's this?" I asked. Brian stayed standing. "The house paperwork." Vanessa sat across from me with her coat still on. Her perfume carried a faint citrus smell, and the sleeve of her jacket brushed the table as she straightened the folder until it lined up with the edge. They had closed on the house a week earlier. I had seen pictures. Stone front, 3-car garage, high ceilings, the kind of place where every room seemed designed to prove something to the next room. I opened the packet. The first mortgage was close to $960,000. I looked up. "You already closed." Brian pulled out the chair beside his wife. "Yes. And now you're bringing me the mortgage?" "Not the mortgage." His voice had the clipped rhythm he used when he wanted a sales meeting to sound finished before anyone disagreed. "The part we discussed." I turned another page. "What part did we discuss?" Vanessa answered before he did. $600,000. The refrigerator compressor clicked off behind me. For a few seconds, all I heard was the small ticking of the kitchen clock Ellen had bought years earlier. I closed the folder. "No." Brian rubbed his thumb across his lower lip. "Dad, you've saved enough. It's time to help the family. You bought a $1.2 million house without asking me for $1. Vanessa's chair moved softly against the hardwood. "We didn't think we needed to ask twice." "Twice?" She looked at Brian. "My son reached for his phone but didn't unlock it. You told me. When you're ready for the house, the money will be there." The words sounded familiar. Not the meaning. The words. I could almost hear myself saying them, but the memory wouldn't settle anywhere. Ellen had been gone 6 years. Those years had left boxes in closets, old email chains, medical receipts, half-finished conversations I had stopped opening because everyone seemed to contain her name. "When did I say that?" I asked. "You texted it," Brian said. "Show me." Vanessa folded her hands over her purse. "We kept everything. That wasn't my question." Brian finally unlocked his phone, then set it face down instead of handing it over. "Why does this have to become an interrogation?" "Because you're asking me for $600,000 after you already signed for the house." His jaw shifted. "I'm asking you to do what you said you'd do." I pushed the folder back. "No." Vanessa stood first. She buttoned her coat slowly. "Okay, Patrick." That was all. Brian followed her toward the front door, but I caught his arm before he reached it. "Give me 10 minutes, I said. "Bring me the mortgage statement, your income, the taxes, insurance, everything. We'll sit down and see what you can actually carry." He looked at my hand until I let go. "I don't need a budget lesson. You brought me $1 million mortgage. I brought you a commitment." "No, Brian. You brought me a debt you created before you told me I was part of it." His car keys clicked against his wedding ring as he closed his fist. "You always do this," he said. "Every dollar has to come with a lecture. I don't co-sign adult children's debt. You've known that for years. This isn't co-signing. Then what is it? Brian opened the door. Cold air came through the gap and ran across the kitchen floor. Keeping your word. The door shut hard enough to rattle the framed photograph beside it. For 3 weeks, I heard almost nothing from him. Then a man in a dark overcoat came to my office after lunch and asked if I was Patrick Sullivan. He handed me a thick envelope. The paper inside had that dry courthouse smell, toner and fresh copy stock. I read the first page standing beside my desk. Brian Sullivan and Vanessa Sullivan. Plaintiffs. Patrick Sullivan. Defendant. They wanted $600,000. The claim said they had relied on my promise of substantial financial support when choosing and financing their home, and that my refusal after closing had left them exposed to losses they would not otherwise have taken on. Then I saw the quotation. When you're ready for the house, the money will be there. Nothing before it, nothing after it. I sat down. Brian's name appeared on the filing. Near the back was his sworn factual statement, supporting the story they were putting before the court. My son hadn't merely complained to a lawyer about me. He had attached his name to the version on those pages. I called an attorney I had used on commercial matters years earlier. Martin Hale. He didn't promise me anything over the phone. Send me the complaint, Martin said. Then we'll talk. 2 days later, I sat across from him in a conference room that smelled faintly of printer heat. He tapped the quoted text with the capped end of a pen. This is not a $600,000 check, Martin said. I know, but don't confuse that with saying the case can't cost you money. I watched him turn a page. They're claiming reliance, he continued. They'll say they made financial decisions because they believed you had promised support. We need the full communication, not just this line. I don't remember the conversation. That's different from saying it didn't happen. I know that too. Martin studied me for a second. Good. Then don't guess. Do you still have the phone? I pictured the old black phone in the right-hand drawer of my desk at home. I had stopped using it years earlier. But I kept old devices because contractors learn not to throw away records simply because they look obsolete. I think so. Find it. Don't alter anything. Don't start deleting messages because you think they're irrelevant. And don't call Brian asking what he has. That evening, I went straight to the study. The desk drawer dragged against the frame the way it always did. Pens rolled toward the front. I moved a stack of warranty cards, 2 charging cables, an old tape measure, and a small envelope of Ellen's photographs. No phone. I checked the second drawer. Nothing. Then the cabinet. Nothing there either. I stood with both drawers open, trying to remember the last time I had held that device. During Ellen's illness, Brian had a spare key to the house. He had come and gone often, carrying groceries, picking up prescriptions, helping me move furniture when we were trying to make the first floor easier for his mother. That fact proved nothing. Still, I could hear Martin's question again. Do you still have the phone? I closed the drawer and looked at the complaint lying on the desk beside me. One sentence from years earlier had somehow become the foundation for a $600,000 demand. And the one device that might tell me what I had actually meant was no longer where I had left it. If the phone isn't in the drawer, don't make Brian the answer just because you're angry with him, Martin Hale told me. His voice came through my speakerphone while I stood in the storage room off my garage, surrounded by boxes I had not opened since Ellen died. Cardboard scraped across concrete as I pulled one carton from beneath another. Dust caught in my throat. The room smelled of old paper, cedar blocks, and the faint machine oil from tools stored along the opposite wall. I'm not accusing him, I said. Good. Keep it that way. We prove things. We don't decorate gaps. That was Martin. The box marked Ellen. Office had been shoved behind 2 bins of tax records when I remodeled the study. Inside were appointment calendars, appliance manuals, a knitted scarf, and the black phone I had been looking for. I held it for a second before turning it over. The case was scratched near the charging port. Dead battery. No miracle. Martin had warned me about that too. Old phones weren't magic vaults. Data disappeared. Accounts stopped syncing. Batteries swelled. Passwords got forgotten. Still, finding it settled one thing. Brian hadn't taken it from my desk. I had moved it myself and forgotten where it went. That mattered to me more than I wanted to admit. Over the next few days, Martin's office worked outward, instead of gambling everything on the device. Old email accounts, cloud records, printed invoices, anything tied to the period when Ellen was sick. I searched my own files and found bills from a carpenter, a medical equipment company, and an electrician who had widened the first-floor doorway for her wheelchair. Then I remembered my younger sister, Diane. During Ellen's last year, Diane had helped me compare costs because I was trying to keep my wife at home instead of moving her into a facility. I called her after dinner. "Pat," Diane said, "if this is about Brian's lawsuit, I'm trying very hard not to say what I'm thinking." "Then don't. I need you to search your email." "For what?" "Anything I sent you about the downstairs renovation, late 2019. Maybe a screenshot from Brian." Keys began clicking on her end. Diane had always been able to fill silence. That night she didn't. After several minutes, she said, "I have something." My fingers tightened around the phone. "Read it." "You forwarded me an image. Brian asks whether the family care reserve is enough to finish the downstairs work before Ellen comes home. Then you answer him." Diane stopped. "Answer what?" Her voice dropped. "The sentence they're using against you." She emailed me the attachment. The screenshot appeared on my laptop with a timestamp from late 2019. Brian's message sat above mine. He was asking about getting the house ready for his mother, specifically the first-floor bedroom, bathroom rails, and the temporary ramp we had discussed with the contractor. Then came my reply. "When you're ready for the house, the money will be there." The house. My house. Not Brian's future home. Not $600,000. Not a promise to finance a purchase that wouldn't happen for more than 6 years. I printed the email and drove it to Martin's office the next morning. He read it twice. "Better," Martin said. "Better. It's corroboration. Don't turn one screenshot into the same mistake they're making with one sentence. We authenticate the original attachment. Match the timestamp. Find the invoices and see what else synced from that period. But you can see what it means. I can see what it appears to mean. That's why we do the rest." By the end of that week, his office had matched Diane's attachment to my old email records and to invoices for work at my address. The dates lined up. So did the purpose. For the first time since the complaint arrived, I had something solid enough to put in front of Brian. I asked him to meet me at a diner off Roosevelt Road. Neutral ground. No, Vanessa. No lawyers. Brian arrived 9 minutes late and left his coat on. "You've got 20 minutes, he said. I slid a copy of the screenshot across the table. A coffee cup clicked against a saucer behind him. The grill hissed from the kitchen. Brian read the page once, then again, slower. He didn't ask where I got it. That told me plenty. "You knew," I said. Brian set the paper down. "I knew Mom was part of that conversation." "Part of it? The whole conversation is about bringing your mother home. Dad, you always said there would be money for family. That's not what you sued me over." His mouth tightened. "You're acting like 6 words erase everything else. They're your 6 words now. You put them in a complaint." Brian looked toward the window. Cars moved through dirty piles of late winter snow along the curb. "Vanessa passed on opportunities because we were building a life together," he said. "We made decisions based on what we understood our family situation to be. Did I promise you $600,000? You promised support. For that house?" He reached for his coffee but didn't drink it. "You know what Mom would have wanted. That landed harder than the lawsuit papers had. Ellen had spent her last months worrying that Brian worked too much, slept too little, and never called unless something was wrong. She had also kept a notebook beside her medication tray because she hated owing anyone $5 without writing it down. I folded my copy of the screenshot. "Don't use your mother to finish a sentence she never heard." Brian's chair shifted back. "This is why nobody can talk to you. Everything becomes evidence. You sued me." For once, he had no quick answer. I gave him one anyway. "Withdraw it. We can still stop this before it eats whatever's left between us." Brian picked up his coat. "Talk to Martin," he said. "My attorney will talk to him." "One more thing," I said. "Did you know that Quote was missing the home care messages before your case was filed?" His hand stopped on the back of the chair. I knew there were other messages. That's not what I asked. Brian put on his coat. I'm not doing a deposition in a diner. He had chosen his words carefully, but not carefully enough. He hadn't said no. Then he walked out, leaving the screenshot beside his untouched coffee. 2 evenings later, my cousin Paul called. We hadn't spoken since Christmas. Patrick, he began, stretching my name the way people do when they've already chosen a side but want credit for asking. What's going on with Brian's house? What did Brian tell you? Vanessa sent something around. She says you promised to help. They bought based on that, and now you're using lawyers to leave them holding the bag. I looked at the printed message on my kitchen counter. Did she send the whole conversation? Paul paused. I don't know. Then you know less than you think. They're your kids, Pat. Brian is 39. That's not what I mean. I know exactly what you mean. After we hung up, another message arrived from an aunt, then one from a former neighbor who had known Ellen. Nobody asked whether $600,000 had ever been promised. They asked why I was letting my son lose his home. The wording was too similar to be accidental. Martin called the following afternoon. Their side isn't conceding the context point, he said. They're arguing the message is part of a broader pattern of promised family support. Even after seeing the rest? Patrick. Litigation doesn't end because the other side sees a document you like. Paper shuffled near his receiver. And they've served discovery. On what? Investment accounts, prior gifts to Brian. Transfers. Communications about financial support. They want to build the broader pattern they just described. I drove to Martin's office and found a thick set of requests waiting on the conference table. Some were ordinary. Some were broad enough that he had already marked objections in pencil. Then I reached one near the back. It requested all communications concerning financial support anticipated for Brian and Vanessa before their home purchase. I read it again. Until then, I had thought the fight was about a sentence from 2019. Now they were asking for everything that came before the house. And for the first time, I wondered whether $600,000 had been chosen long before Brian ever pushed those mortgage papers across my kitchen table. Martin put a yellow legal pad between us and drew 2 boxes. One is what they can reasonably ask for, he said. The other is what they'd like to ask for. I looked at the discovery requests spread across his conference table. Bank statements, investment summaries, prior gifts to Brian, records showing transfers between me and Ellen before she died, even the old account we had used to pay for her home care. And which box is my private life in? I asked. Martin capped his pen. Right now? Both. They want to show you had the means to make the alleged promise, Martin continued. We'll object where they're too broad. We'll produce what's relevant. But fighting every page just because you hate the question can make you look like you're hiding the answer. I'm not hiding anything. I know. The court doesn't know you. That sentence stayed with me. For 40 years, I had treated financial records like plumbing inside a wall. Necessary. Private. Now Brian's lawyers wanted to pull sections open and point at whatever looked useful. Martin had already limited several requests, but I still had to produce enough to show the history of support between my son and me. Tuition help after college. A smaller loan Brian had repaid. Money Ellen and I contributed to the wedding. Nothing close to $600,000. Then Martin slid a closing statement toward me. Let's stop reading their story and read the house. That part I understood. Numbers behave better than people. Brian and Vanessa had paid about $1,200,000. Their down payment was roughly $240,000. The first mortgage sat near $960,000. Taxes and insurance pushed the monthly housing cost high enough that even with their combined income, there wasn't much room for a bad sales quarter or a slow real estate season. I ran my finger down the figures. If I put in $600,000, they don't just make the payment easier. No, Martin said. They create a wall of equity. Exactly. A payment that size would cut the loan balance dramatically. It wasn't the same thing as paying off the mortgage, and it wasn't the exact amount needed to rescue them from immediate default. That bothered me. Until then, $600,000 had sounded like a number Brian picked because it was large enough to make me useful and small enough in his mind, to call reasonable. Now it looked engineered. Martin brought in a financial consultant his firm used on commercial disputes. Her name was Leah Morgan, and she spoke the way good estimators do, without decorating anything. If the contribution went straight to principal, Leah said, their debt would drop fast. Their monthly structure could improve depending on whether they refinanced or recast. More important, they'd have a much larger ownership cushion. Accessible? I asked. Not automatically. Leah tapped the mortgage packet. That depends on lender rules, title, seasoning requirements for the product, credit, income, appraisal, all of it. Equity isn't a checking account. Martin nodded toward another document. But somebody was asking about accessing it. The page came from records Brian's side had produced to support their reliance claim. They wanted to show they had planned their financing around money they expected from me. Buried in that package was an inquiry to the mortgage broker. Future home equity access. Not a loan approval. Not a promise. A question. The date was after they had started assembling the purchase financing, but before they brought the mortgage papers to my kitchen. I read the wording twice. How soon after closing? Leah pointed to the broker's response. He doesn't promise a date. He says eligibility would depend on the specific product and conditions at the time. So this proves what? Martin leaned back. By itself? Only that somebody was thinking past the purchase. Somebody. The inquiry had come from Vanessa's email. Brian called me that evening. No greeting. Martin's turning this into a forensic audit of our marriage. He's reading documents your side produced. Vanessa asks brokers questions all day. That's her job. She asked about your house, our house, and future equity. Brian exhaled hard enough for the phone microphone to catch it. It's called planning. What were you planning to do with $600,000 after I paid it? Pay down the house. That's not what I asked. Silence. Then Vanessa's voice came from farther away. Put him on speaker. A second later, her tone sharpened through the line. Patrick, real estate agents think in options, equity, refinancing, future acquisitions, tax consequences. Asking a question doesn't mean we were planning some scheme. I didn't say scheme. You didn't have to. What was the $600,000 for? To reduce the debt you said you'd help us with. And after that? Vanessa gave a small laugh. After that would be our business. There it was. Not an answer. A boundary. I had spent weeks being told that their mortgage was family responsibility when the bill pointed toward me. The moment I asked what happened after my money arrived, the house became private again. Martin did not let me turn that inconsistency into a conclusion. The next morning, he placed the HELOC inquiry beside the allegations in the complaint. This does something useful, he said. It proves they wanted my money for something else. No, not yet. I disliked that answer. It gives us a reason to ask a narrower question. Martin continued. They say your promised contribution shaped the financing. Their own production shows the broker was discussing future liquidity tied to the property. That makes communications about the transaction, anticipated contribution, and equity planning relevant. So we ask the broker. We subpoena a defined set of records. We do not call him and fish. That distinction mattered. Martin drafted the request around the house transaction. Expected family contribution, future liquidity, and possible equity access. No demand for every client file. No attempt to pry into unrelated business. A chain. The complaint opened the financing. The financing exposed the equity question. The equity question opened the broker records. For the first time, I could see how one piece might legitimately lead to another without anyone handing me the answer. Brian tried once more before the subpoena went out. He came to my office late on a Thursday and stood in the doorway while I finished a consulting estimate. You've spent enough on lawyers, he said. So have you. That's why I'm here. He put a single sheet on my desk. Settlement numbers. Less than $600,000. Pay this, Brian said, and we end it before it gets ugly. I kept my hands off the paper. Where does the money go? His brow tightened. What? Straight to mortgage principal? That's the point. Then put it in writing. Payment directly to the lender. Principal reduction only. No transfer through your accounts. Brian stared at me. Vanessa appeared behind him a moment later. She had waited in the hall. That is not how settlement works, she said. It can work, however, the agreement says. Her mouth curved, but there was no warmth in it. Once you honor your commitment, how Brian and I manage our finances isn't your concern. Then my money isn't your concern either. Brian shoved the settlement page back into his folder. Forget it. He left first. Vanessa stayed half a second longer. You keep treating him like a contractor asking for an advance, she said. No. Contractors show me where the money is going. Her shoes clicked away down the corridor. The following Monday, Martin called. The broker subpoena has been served. Good. There's something else. A keyboard clicked on his end. One of our staff checked public business filings connected to Vanessa. She formed an LLC. I sat straighter. When? Before the house purchase contract. What kind? Broad purpose. Property consulting. Acquisitions. Investment services. Nothing illegal. Nothing unusual by itself. Brian listed? No. I drove to Martin's office and read the state filing myself. Vanessa's name appeared as the controlling member. Brian's did not appear anywhere. Then I looked at the formation date. She had created the company before she and my son signed the contract to buy the house. Martin slid the subpoena confirmation beside it. Don't race ahead, he said. We still don't know what the LLC has to do with the house. I placed one finger on the date. Maybe not. But now there were two questions where there had been one. Why had Vanessa been asking about future equity before asking me to pay $600,000? And why had she built a property investment company before Brian even bought the property he was suing me to save? Martin called before 8 on Tuesday morning. The broker production came in. Don't read too much into the index yet. That warning told me there was something worth reading. By 9, I was in his office with a paper cup cooling beside my elbow while he opened the production on a conference room screen. The files were exactly what the subpoena had asked for. Communications about Brian and Vanessa's purchase, the expected family contribution, future liquidity, and possible access to home equity. Nothing else. A name appeared in several messages. Calvin Pierce. I had never heard it before. Vanessa had copied him on 2 emails to the mortgage broker and mentioned a meeting with him in another. His title in the signature block read, Capital Planning Consultant. Who is he? I asked. Martin scrolled instead of answering. Right now, he's a man whose name appears in responsive records. That's all we know. 3 meetings and 2 copied emails is more than a name. It's still not a motive. The distinction irritated me because it was correct. One email discussed how much equity might remain after a large principal reduction. Another referred to future investment capacity if additional family funds became available after closing. Calvin replied with a short note asking whether the money would be a gift, a loan, or proceeds from some other family arrangement. No answer appeared in that chain. Then Martin stopped scrolling. There. The broker had written to Vanessa. If the anticipated contribution is used as discussed, confirm whether the future investment entity will be borrowing separately. Future investment entity. I took the public LLC filing from my folder and laid it beside the screen. Vanessa had formed the company before she and Brian signed the purchase contract. She was listed as the controlling member. Brian's name was nowhere on it. Martin compared the dates. Now we have a connection worth asking about, he said. The LLC. Possibly. We still don't assume it. What other investment entity would she have? That's the kind of question depositions are for. Before that, we ask only for what this record makes relevant. I leaned back. You enjoy telling me not to finish sentences. It keeps you from paying me to repair them later. His office drafted a narrow request for non-privileged financing materials concerning any entity Vanessa planned to capitalize with money derived from the house, the alleged family contribution, or proceeds from the lawsuit. Martin refused to demand her entire business file. If we ask for everything, he said, they'll call it phishing. If we ask for documents tied to the exact money they're suing you over, we have a reason. Their attorney objected anyway. For several days, letters moved back and forth. Martin showed me enough to understand the dispute without letting me turn every adjective into an insult. Brian's side argued that Vanessa's separate business planning had little to do with whether I had promised support. Martin answered that their own financing records connected the expected contribution to future equity and an investment entity. The scope was eventually narrowed further by agreement. No personal diaries, no unrelated client files, no broad sweep through every account Vanessa held, just financing models, communications, and planning documents that reference the house equity, my alleged contribution, or a possible recovery from the family dispute. That was all we needed. The first batch arrived a week later. Calvin Pierce wasn't a secret boyfriend, a silent partner hiding in a back room, or some stranger waiting to rescue me with a confession. He was exactly what his signature block said. A consultant who helped small investors model capital for property acquisitions and private lending. His records showed Vanessa had met with him before the house purchase to discuss buying small rental properties through her LLC. I read the meeting summary twice. "She's building a real estate business," I said. Martin nodded. "That's what this supports. Without Brian, the current ownership documents don't list him. That's not the same as proving he knew nothing or would never benefit." Again, the line I wanted to cross was right there, and Martin kept a hand on my shoulder without touching me. A financial forecast came next. It was dry enough to put most people to sleep. Acquisition targets, repair reserves, expected rents, cash requirements, possible sources of initial capital. Then I found the rows that mattered: home equity, family contribution, possible settlement proceeds, not as guaranteed money, not as a completed transfer. They appeared as potential capital sources in different scenarios. I ran my fingertip across the printed table. 600,000 comes in, the mortgage drops, equity grows, and some of that equity may later support this company. Martin corrected me immediately. May. Subject to lender requirements, credit, timing, title, and whatever product exists then. Don't make the model stronger than it is. But she modeled it. Yes. That one word mattered. The money Brian called family support had another possible destination after it touched the house. A roof over their heads was only part of the picture. I drove home with the forecast in a sealed case folder on the passenger seat. At a red light, I almost called Brian. My thumb hovered over his name. I wanted to ask one simple question. Did you know? Instead, I put the phone down. The documents did not say Vanessa planned to leave him. They did not say she intended to steal his equity. They did not even prove Brian was excluded from every future benefit. What they showed was narrower and, in some ways, harder to dismiss. Vanessa had designed a financial structure she controlled, and she had considered money connected to my contribution and their home as possible fuel for it. Whether my son understood, that was still unknown. At home, I found an old photograph of Brian and Ellen tucked behind the kitchen clock while I was replacing the battery. He was maybe 16, taller than his mother already, standing beside her at a school fundraiser with one arm around her shoulders. Ellen was laughing at something outside the frame. For a few seconds, the lawsuit disappeared. Then my phone rang. "Brian," I answered. "Your lawyer is digging through Vanessa's company now," he said. "Only documents tied to the money you're suing me for. You don't get to inspect her future because you don't like our house. I didn't ask about her future. Your financing records did." His breathing changed slightly. "What does that mean?" That question stopped me. If Brian already knew the LLC was tied to the equity plan, he hid it well. If he didn't, telling him now would let Vanessa explain everything before anyone had to answer formally. "Ask your wife," I said. "I'm asking you. Then wait until your attorney gives you the documents." A cabinet door closed somewhere on his end. Vanessa's voice followed, too distant for me to make out the words. Brian lowered his voice. "Dad, whatever story Martin is building, don't turn this into something it isn't." That's exactly what he keeps telling me. My son ended the call without saying goodbye. The next afternoon, Martin sent me one more page from the production. It confirmed what the public filing had suggested. Vanessa held the ownership interest in the LLC under the current structure. Brian did not. I stared at his missing name longer than I should have. I could tell him, I said when Martin called. Tell him what? That his wife built a company she controls and considered using equity from their house to fund it. That's supported. And that she's preparing a life without him. Martin's answer came fast. That is not. I walked to my office window. Trucks moved along the frontage road below, tires hissing over wet pavement. So I wait. You let the evidence answer the next question. Brian's deposition is being scheduled. I turned from the glass. When? A few weeks. Martin paused. Patrick. Vanessa has done most of the talking so far. In a deposition, Brian won't have that luxury. He'll be under oath, with his own words attached to every answer. The notice arrived later that day. I read my son's name at the top, then the date beneath it. For months, I had been trying to understand what Vanessa had planned. Now I was about to learn how much of it Brian had known. What do you want him to admit? I asked Martin. Nothing. We were in his conference room an hour before Brian's deposition. A legal pad sat between us beside 3 binders of exhibits. Martin turned one binder so the tabs faced me. I want dates, he said. Amounts. Places. Who was present. What was actually said. If Brian's memory supports his claim, the timeline will show it. If it doesn't, we don't need theatrics. My job was smaller and harder. Sit there. Listen. Do not answer for my son. Before we went in, Martin reviewed the financial help Ellen and I had given Brian over the years. Wedding money, a loan after college that Brian repaid, a few smaller family expenses. None involved $600,000. None involved the house he bought with Vanessa. Martin pushed my own production summary toward me. If he says you always handed him whatever he asked for, this matters. The page showed dates and amounts. Ordinary help, limited help, help with a beginning and an end. I never kept score against him, I said. You kept records. That isn't the same thing. No, Martin said. Today, that difference may help you. The deposition room had no jury box, no judge, nothing grand. Just a rectangular table, a court reporter, water bottles, laptops, and too much fluorescent light. Brian arrived with his attorney. His tie was slightly crooked. He did not look at me until after he was sworn in. Martin began with ordinary questions. Name, address, employment, marriage. Then he moved to the promise. What did your father tell you regarding financial support for the home purchase? Brian folded his hands. He told me the money would be there when I was ready. When did he tell you that? More than once. Give me the first date you remember. I don't remember an exact date. Month? No. Year? Brian glanced at his attorney. Approximately, Martin added. Over the years. Martin let the court reporter catch up. Where were you when your father first told you he would provide money for this specific home purchase? I didn't say this specific property. What specific home purchase did you understand him to be discussing? Brian shifted in his chair. The house Vanessa and I would eventually buy. How much did he promise? The support we needed. What amount? Brian reached for his water. $600,000 became the amount. That wasn't my question. Before you purchased the property, did your father ever say, I will give you $600,000? No, not in those exact words. Did he ever write that? Not the exact number. Did he ever identify a date when he would transfer $600,000? No. Did he ever identify an account the money would come from? No. Brian's attorney objected to the form of one question, then another. Martin adjusted and kept moving. No raised voice. That made it worse. Each answer landed alone. Martin placed the old message thread in front of Brian. Do you recognize this? Yes. What was your mother's condition at the time? Brian's fingers stopped against the edge of the page. She was sick. Were modifications being made to your parents' home? Yes. For what purpose? So Mom could stay there. Martin pointed to the message above mine. Did you ask your father whether the family care reserve would cover the downstairs work? Brian looked down. Yes. And his response included the sentence, when you're ready for the house, The money will be there. Yes. What house? A pause. My parents' house. The court reporter's keys clicked. I kept my hands beneath the table. Martin continued. Is there anything in this thread about purchasing a home for you and Vanessa? Not in this thread. Anything about a mortgage for you? No. Anything about $600,000? No. Brian lifted his chin. But that wasn't the only conversation we ever had about money. Martin nodded. Tell me the strongest other conversation. Brian described dinners where I had said, family should help family. A Christmas when I told him Ellen and I had saved so he would never have to carry us financially. A conversation after his wedding when I said I hoped he would own a good home someday. Martin asked the same questions each time. How much? When? What property? What condition? Brian's answers kept returning to the same place. General support. No specific $600,000 promise. Then Martin moved to the number itself. Who first proposed $600,000? Brian's attorney leaned forward. Asked and answered in the written discovery. I'm asking for his testimony. Brian stared at the water bottle. Vanessa calculated it. How? She looked at what we needed. To do what? Reduce the mortgage. Martin waited. Brian added, and what Dad could afford. The cap on his bottle gave a faint plastic crack beneath his thumb. Did your father participate in that calculation? No. Did he approve it? Not formally. Informally? Brian looked at me for the first time. No. That answer changed something I had been carrying since the complaint arrived. $600,000 had never come from a conversation between father and son. It came from Vanessa's math. Martin turned to the verified statement Brian had signed. When you signed this, had you seen the full home care message thread? Brian read the page. Yes. You knew the quoted sentence appeared in a conversation about preparing your parents' home for your mother's care? Yes. You knew the complaint quoted the sentence without those surrounding messages? His attorney objected. Brian answered anyway. Yes. Did anyone prevent you from reading the statement before you signed it? No. Did anyone force you to sign? No. Did you believe the quoted sentence, by itself, described the complete context in which it was written? Brian's attorney spoke sharply. Objection. Vague. Martin rephrased. When you signed your statement, did you know the sentence had originally been written in response to a message about work being done at your father's house for your mother? Yes. And you signed anyway? Brian's jaw moved once. Yes. He tried to repair it. Because it wasn't just about one text. My father had made it clear for years that family money was there for family needs. Martin closed the binder. Your testimony is that no separate conversation contained a promise of $600,000? I already said there were many conversations. Did any one of them contain that amount? No. Thank you. The deposition continued through other financial history, but the center of the case had changed for me. Brian had not been tricked into signing something he never read. He knew. That did not make Vanessa less important. It made my son responsible for his own name. When we stepped into the hallway afterward, Brian followed me toward the elevators. Dad. I stopped. His attorney was still inside. Martin stood several feet away, checking his phone. Brian loosened his tie. Vanessa's under a lot of pressure. So are you. We can still settle this. You tried that. Not like this. He lowered his voice. Meet us halfway. Everybody stops bleeding money. I looked at him. Halfway between what happened and what you signed? His face tightened. You really need to win that badly? I offered you a way out before this deposition. You offered me surrender. No. I asked you to tell the truth before somebody made you do it under oath. The elevator doors opened. Brian stepped inside. For a second, I thought he might say something else. He pressed the lobby button instead. Martin waited until the doors closed. Don't celebrate, he said. I'm not. Good. His testimony helps us. It doesn't end the case. Back in the conference room, Martin's assistant had left a message on his laptop. New production from the mortgage broker had arrived while we were in the deposition. Martin opened the file index. Dozens of entries filled the screen. Dates, senders, subjects. He scrolled once, then stopped. I saw Vanessa's name. Beside it was an email subject. Potential liquidity from family dispute. Open it, I said. Martin didn't. He pointed at the date first. I read it, then read it again. The email had been sent before the night Brian and Vanessa came to my kitchen with the mortgage papers. Before I said no. Before, according to their lawsuit, there was any dispute to plan for. Martin opened the email only after his assistant confirmed the production number matched the broker's records. Now we read what it says, he told me, not what the subject line makes us want it to say. The message was from Vanessa to the mortgage broker. Calvin Pierce, her business consultant, had been copied. Vanessa wrote that she was evaluating possible sources of future liquidity after the home purchase. One possibility was a voluntary family contribution that could be applied to the mortgage. If family funding did not materialize, she wanted to know whether proceeds from a family dispute or settlement could later be treated differently when she evaluated equity access and investment financing. I read the paragraph 3 times. The date stayed where it was, before my kitchen table, before my refusal. She already had the lawsuit in mind, I said. Martin lifted one finger. A dispute. Maybe litigation. Maybe settlement. Keep the language exact. She was planning how to use money from a fight with me before we had the fight. That is closer. He opened the next communication. The broker had asked Vanessa to clarify whether the expected family money would be a gift, a loan, or another form of contribution. Vanessa answered that the preferred outcome was voluntary family support. She then added that if Patrick declined to fund, counsel could advise on recovery options based on prior family commitments. My name sat there in black letters. Not Dad. Patrick. The wording had the dry distance of a business memo. Another message followed several days later. Calvin asked her to model both possibilities separately because financing assumptions should not depend on an uncertain source. Vanessa replied that she was doing exactly that. One column for yes, another for no. If I paid, the money could reduce the mortgage and improve the equity position. If I refused, a dispute might produce money later through settlement or recovery. She had not known which answer I would give. That was the point. She had prepared for both. I stood so quickly my chair rolled backward into the wall. Give me Brian's email. Martin did not move. I'm sending this to him. No. He sat under oath yesterday and defended a case his wife was discussing before I ever said no. We don't know whether he saw these emails. Then he should see them now. Martin closed the laptop halfway. We have an index, several produced messages, and a broker production that still needs a clean foundation. We verify the complete chain. We make sure attachments aren't missing. We confirm dates and recipients. Then we decide how to use it. He's my son, and he's an opposing plaintiff. The sentence scraped. I walked to the window and looked down at traffic moving through the intersection below. A delivery truck stopped too far into the crosswalk. A woman with a stroller went around its bumper without looking up. Every day I wait, I said. He goes home with her. Martin's voice softened, but not much. Every day you wait. You avoid telling Brian something you cannot yet prove about what he knew. I turned around. What can we prove? That Vanessa discussed 2 possible funding paths before the confrontation. Voluntary contribution if you paid. A possible family dispute or recovery path if you didn't. We can prove she was thinking about future liquidity under either scenario. And the lawsuit wasn't spontaneous. Her contingency planning wasn't spontaneous. Be careful with the rest. I hated careful language that afternoon. It was also the only thing keeping me from making the same mistake Brian had made. 2 days later, Martin's office confirmed the emails against the broker's production log and the related message chain. The dates held. The recipients held. Nothing in the missing attachments reversed the meaning. Martin also showed me the broker's ordinary file notes from the same period. They recorded Vanessa asking questions about timing, source of funds, and what documentation might be required if family money arrived. The notes did not accuse her of anything. That made them more useful. They had been written before anyone had a lawsuit to win. I asked whether we could use the emails immediately. Not by waving printouts around, Martin said. We established that they came from the broker's business records, preserve the production chain, and use testimony if necessary. A good document still needs a door into the record. For once, waiting no longer felt passive. We were building the door. Then Brian's attorney sent us a settlement proposal. The timing was hard to ignore. Martin called me in rather than forwarding it. They want dismissal by agreement, he said. What do they want from me? A payment substantially below $600,000. Each side bears its own attorney fees. Confidential terms. No admission by either side. How much? He told me. The number was still painful. But I could write the check without selling property or changing my life. For several seconds, I understood why people settled cases they believed they should win. No more document requests. No hearing. No sitting across from Brian while lawyers translated our family into exhibits. I could pay and make the machinery stop. Martin watched me read. This is your decision, he said. Not mine. If I sign, what happens to their claim? It ends under the agreed terms. And the allegation that I promised them the money? No admission from you. That isn't what I asked. Martin leaned back. The public record will show a dispute that's settled. It won't give you a judicial declaration about every factual allegation. I took the proposal home. That night, Diane came over with takeout because she said my refrigerator contained mustard, eggs, and evidence. I showed her the settlement number, but not the protected attorney communications behind it. She set down her fork. Pay it. I looked at her. I knew you'd hate that answer, she said. You think I should reward this? I think you should decide what you're buying. If that check buys your son back, maybe it's cheap. You heard his deposition. I heard what you told me about it. He knew the message was about Ellen. Diane rubbed one thumb against the cardboard rim of her food container. I know. And signed anyway. I know that too. Then what am I buying? She had no answer for a while. Finally, she said, maybe just an end. That was the first argument for settlement that reached me. Not fear. Exhaustion. I slept badly and woke before dawn. On the kitchen counter sat the old photograph of Brian and Ellen I had found behind the clock. I carried it to the table and put the settlement proposal beside it. Ellen would have wanted her son protected. She also would have asked what he was being protected from. A mistake was one thing. A lie you kept signing after being shown the truth was another. By mid-morning, I was back in Martin's office. Suppose I accept, I said. What does Brian learn? Martin did not answer the moral question for me. Legally, the case ends. And factually, the parties disagree and settle. I looked at the signature line. Brian could spend the rest of his life saying his father had promised the money and paid only after being sued. Vanessa could say the same thing. The home care message would remain something our lawyers argued about, instead of something tested against the chronology. I picked up Martin's pen. For 1 second, he probably thought I was going to sign the settlement. Instead, I wrote that I rejected it. Martin read my notation. You're sure? I offered Brian a chance to withdraw before his deposition. He chose the case. Now I want the record to show what the case is built on. This will cost more. I know. It could get uglier. I know. And the emails do not prove Brian knew what Vanessa was planning. I know that too. That was the part I could no longer pretend away. Vanessa had prepared 2 routes to the same pool of money. Brian had signed a misleading version of my old message. But whether he knew about her contingency planning before the lawsuit remained unanswered. Martin placed the rejected proposal into the file. Then we finish authenticating the broker chronology and put it where it belongs. At the hearing. He nodded. Then the next time she explains why this case exists, she'll be doing it in front of the judge. Mrs. Sullivan. I want to be precise. Judge Keller's voice was quieter than I remembered from the opening minutes, but the courtroom microphone carried every word. Vanessa sat in the witness chair with one hand resting beside the binder her attorney had placed in front of her. The broker's records were already in evidence. A records custodian had authenticated the production that morning, and Martin had walked through the dates without rushing them. The email on the monitor had been sent before Brian and Vanessa came to my kitchen. Before my refusal, before the lawsuit claimed the dispute began. Judge Keller looked over his glasses. You testified that litigation became necessary after Patrick Sullivan refused to honor what you understood as his commitment. Is that correct? Vanessa nodded. Yes. Please answer aloud. Yes, Your Honor. And this email was sent before that refusal? Yes. What litigation proceeds were you anticipating? Vanessa glanced at her attorney. He rose. Your Honor, the email uses hypothetical language. Mrs. Sullivan was exploring financial scenarios, not planning a specific lawsuit. Judge Keller turned back to Vanessa. That may be your position. I'm asking her what she meant. Vanessa folded her hands. I work in real estate. We discuss contingencies. Gifts fall through. Financing changes. Family arrangements can become disputes. So there was no lawsuit planned? No. No dispute with Mr. Sullivan? Not yet. Judge Keller tapped the printed email. Then what family dispute did you expect might produce proceeds? A faint ventilation hum ran above us. Somewhere behind me, a chair creaked. Vanessa answered carefully. I knew there was a possibility Patrick might not follow through. My son moved beside his attorney. That sentence mattered. Martin stood. May I, Your Honor? The judge nodded. Martin brought up the next email. Vanessa's own words appeared on the monitor. If Patrick refuses to fund, counsel can advise on recovery options based on prior family commitments. Martin did not read it dramatically. He simply let the court see it. When you wrote, if Patrick refuses to fund, had Patrick refused? No. Had he told you he would not provide $600,000? No. Had he been shown the mortgage papers? No. Had you asked him for $600,000? Vanessa's lips parted, then closed. Not formally. Martin tilted his head. What does formally mean? We had discussed family support. With Patrick? With Brian. With Patrick. Over the years in broader terms. Before this email, had Patrick agreed to the amount you later demanded? No. Had Patrick agreed that money he once reserved for his wife's home care would instead finance your house? No. Her attorney objected. Judge Keller sustained part of it and told Martin to keep the question tied to the record. Martin nodded. Did you know, when you wrote this email, that the text later quoted in your complaint came from a conversation about Ellen Sullivan's care? Vanessa looked at Brian. Only for a second. Yes. Brian's head turned toward her. The movement was small enough that I might have missed it if I had been reading the monitor. I wasn't. I was watching my son, Martin continued. So when you described possible recovery based on prior family commitments, one of the communications you were relying on was a message you knew had originally concerned care arrangements for your mother-in-law? Among other things, what other written promise identified $600,000? Vanessa's attorney objected again. This time Judge Keller answered before Martin could. I have the same question. Vanessa shifted in the witness chair. There wasn't one document with that exact amount. Any document? The judge asked. No. Any email? No. Any text? No. Any signed agreement? No. The judge looked down at his notes. Brian leaned toward his attorney and whispered something. I caught only the last few words. Before we even asked him. His attorney murmured back too softly for me to hear. Vanessa kept her eyes forward. That was the first visible crack between them. Not shouting, not accusation, a question. Martin finished with the chronology. Then Vanessa's attorney tried to repair the damage. He asked about years of family discussions, Patrick's financial ability, Ellen's statements about helping Brian, and the couple's belief that support would eventually come. Vanessa sounded steadier during that part. We did not invent the idea that Patrick would help, she said. Brian grew up hearing that family takes care of family. Her attorney nodded. And did you structure the purchase, believing substantial support was coming? Yes. The phrase gave them somewhere to stand. For a while, I understood why Martin had refused to call the case finished. A promise did not need to arrive wrapped in one perfect document for people to argue about reliance. Then Martin asked to address Brian's deposition testimony. My son's attorney objected that Vanessa's testimony should not become a trial of Brian's credibility. Judge Keller looked at the papers before him. The plaintiffs rely on a shared theory of reliance. Mr. Sullivan's sworn testimony is relevant to what he understood the alleged promise to be. Martin read only a short portion. Before the purchase, did your father ever say, "I will give you $600,000? No, not in those exact words. Did any separate conversation contain that amount? No. Then came the home care thread. Did you know, when you signed your factual statement, that the quoted sentence had been written in response to a discussion about work being done at your parents' house for your mother? Yes. And you signed anyway? Yes. Brian stared at the tabletop. Vanessa turned toward him. This time she did not hide it. Her attorney touched her sleeve, and she faced forward again. I wanted to feel vindicated. Instead, I remembered Brian at 16 with his arm around Ellen in that old photograph, and the distance between that boy and the man sitting 15 feet from me felt measurable. Judge Keller called a short recess. In the hallway, Brian came out after Vanessa. "What did you mean before we asked him?" he said. Vanessa stopped near the drinking fountain. "Not here. You had already talked to people about recovery. I had already planned for the possibility your father would do exactly what he did." Brian lowered his voice. "You told me the lawsuit was because he broke his word at that dinner." Vanessa's face tightened. "And what difference does the calendar make if the promise already existed?" Brian looked at her for several seconds. "It makes a difference to me. Neither of them noticed me until Vanessa did." Her shoulders squared. "Enjoying this, Patrick?" "No." She gave a short laugh. "Of course not." Brian looked between us. I could have told him to come home with me. I did not. He had known the context of the text. He had signed the statement. Vanessa's planning did not erase his choices. When court resumed, Judge Keller did not announce a grand victory. He spoke carefully. "The current record," he said, "did not show a sufficiently definite promise of $600,000 tied to the home purchase. The text message relied on heavily by the plaintiffs came from a different factual setting. The chronology of Vanessa's contingency planning raised serious questions about when the alleged reliance began and what financial assumptions actually drove the transaction. He allowed short supplemental briefing before ruling on Patrick's motion for summary judgment. Then he addressed Brian's deposition. The court is also aware of credibility issues created by sworn testimony concerning the context of the quoted communication. Any request for costs or sanctions will be considered separately and only on an appropriate legal basis. No handcuffs. No shouting. Just a record that no longer looked the way Brian and Vanessa had described it. Outside the courtroom, Martin closed his briefcase. "The claim is in trouble," he said. "Almost dead. Don't make me regret teaching you careful language." I looked across the hallway. Brian stood several yards away while Vanessa spoke to their attorney. He wasn't listening to her. He was watching the floor. Then Vanessa handed the attorney another folder. Brian glanced at the label. His head came up. "What is that?" he asked. Vanessa pulled the folder back toward herself. I couldn't read the label from where I stood, but Brian could. And whatever he saw made him stop asking about the lawsuit and start asking about his wife. Brian showed up at my house the next evening without calling. 3 knocks. Fast. Then 2 more before I reached the door. When I opened it, he was standing on the porch in shirt sleeves despite the cold. His tie was gone. One cuff hung open, and the skin beneath his eyes had the gray cast of somebody who had spent a night arguing instead of sleeping. "She used me," he said. "No hello. No coat. Just that." I stepped aside and let him in. The kitchen still smelled faintly of the coffee I had poured an hour earlier. Brian sat at the same table where he and Vanessa had once pushed the mortgage papers toward me. He looked at the empty place beside him, as if he expected her to appear there. "What did you see in that folder?" I asked. His fingers pressed flat against the tabletop. LLC documents. Forecasts. A financing memo. "You knew she had the company." I knew she had formed something for future rentals. That isn't what you said. I knew the name. I didn't know the structure. I pulled out the chair across from him. What structure? Brian looked up. She owns it. That was in the public filing. All of it, Dad. I waited. She's the controlling owner. I'm not listed. The projections use home equity and possible family money as capital sources. Possible family money. You. The word came out quietly. I did not rescue him from it. Brian rubbed both hands over his face. She told me the house was our foundation. That once we reduced the mortgage, we'd have options. Rentals. Maybe a second property. Something for us. Did you know she was asking about equity access before I said no? No. Did you know she had modeled lawsuit proceeds? No. Did you sign the complaint? His hands stopped. Yes. Did you know my text was about your mother's care? Brian stared at me. You already asked me that. And you already answered. His chair creaked as he leaned back. I'm telling you she used me. And I'm telling you that doesn't erase your signature. The muscles in his jaw tightened. You always have to make it clean. Nothing about this is clean. You think I woke up one morning and decided to sue my father? No. I think you had a lot of chances not to. That silenced him. For several minutes, the furnace clicked through a cycle beneath the floor. Brian watched the vent near the baseboard. I watched him. Then he said, Martin sent my attorney another production notice. I knew what he meant. The narrowed financing materials from Vanessa's LLC had arrived after the hearing. Martin called me the following morning. Come in, he said. Brian should see these through counsel, but there's one document you need to understand before the next conference. At his office, he placed a short draft note on the table. Not a letter to Brian. Not a divorce filing. A note Vanessa had sent Calvin Pierce while discussing how the LLC should hold future acquisitions. One sentence had been highlighted. The entity, and any property acquired through it, should remain under my control, even if Brian and I separate later. I read it once, then again. Martin tapped the page. This is the first document that supports a separation contingency. It does not prove she had decided to leave him. She planned for it. She protected for the possibility, while asking me to fund the equity that could help capitalize this. That connection is supported by the forecast. I sat back. There it was. Narrower than the story I had nearly told myself weeks earlier. But worse, because it was real. Vanessa had not written that she intended to leave Brian. She had written that if they separated, the structure she was building should remain hers. Later that afternoon, the attorneys met by video to discuss the remaining discovery and possible resolution. Brian joined from his lawyer's conference room. Vanessa sat beside him, but there was enough space between their chairs to fit another person. Martin kept the meeting on the lawsuit. Brian did not. Did you tell Calvin you wanted the LLC protected from me? Vanessa turned toward him. I told him I wanted clean ownership. You wrote, if Brian and I separate later, that is standard contingency planning. For a company I thought we were building together? You weren't building it. Brian's mouth opened. Vanessa continued before he could answer. You didn't attend the planning meetings. You didn't research properties. You didn't build the projections. You wanted your father to contribute so we could stop carrying that mortgage like a piano on our backs. Brian's attorney said, let's keep this focused. But Vanessa was already looking at my son. Don't sit there pretending you were dragged into this. Who told me Patrick would never pay unless somebody forced the issue? Brian looked toward his lawyer. Vanessa gave a short laugh. You did. I said he had to take us seriously. You said, make him finally contribute. Brian's face changed. Not because I had learned something new. I already knew he wanted pressure, because the sentence had come back to him in front of everyone. He leaned toward the camera. I did not tell you to build a company around money from a lawsuit. No, Vanessa said. You just wanted the money. Martin cut in before the argument could widen. That is enough. We're not here to referee the marriage. Vanessa's attorney agreed. The meeting returned to discovery schedules. But the legal language could not put the room back together. Afterward, Brian came to my house again. This time he brought copies. the LLC ownership page, the capital forecast, the separation contingency note. He spread them on my kitchen table. "I didn't know about that sentence," he said. "I believe you." His eyes lifted quickly. It was the first easy thing I had given him in months. Then I added, "I also believe you knew what you were doing when you sued me." The relief disappeared. "Dad, you keep trying to make one truth cancel the other." She planned a future without me. She planned for the possibility. Is that supposed to make it better? No. Brian pushed the papers away. "Then what do you want from me?" "Nothing." He laughed once, without humor. "That's convenient. I wanted you to withdraw the case before your deposition. I wanted you to tell the truth before a judge had to sort through it. Those choices are gone." He stared at the kitchen clock. For years, Brian had known I would eventually step in. A bad quarter, a repair bill, a problem too expensive to solve comfortably. I rarely wrote checks without asking questions, but I was still there. That assumption had survived longer than trust. He finally said, "We may lose the house." I did not answer immediately. "We're already stretched," Brian continued. "Legal bills are piling up. Vanessa's commissions have been uneven. If this drags, we can't keep carrying everything." "What are you asking me?" His voice dropped. "Help us hold it until we figure this out." There it was. Not 600,000 this time. No folder. No demand. Just the old expectation in a smaller package. I shook my head. "No." Brian's mouth tightened, but he did not argue. He sat there with both hands around a coffee mug he had never touched. After a while, he said, "We missed a payment." I looked at him. "One mortgage payment?" "Yes." "Have you contacted the servicer?" "We have. They're talking to us about short-term hardship options. Nothing's decided." "Are you asking me to call them?" "No." "Good." He nodded once. The house had spent months as an accusation, a promise, an equity calculation, a reason to sue. Now it was something simpler, a bill that had come due. Brian gathered the papers and stood. At the door, he stopped. "I thought finding out what Vanessa did would make this easier." "For who?" He looked down at the folder in his hand. "I don't know." Then he left. The next morning, Martin called with the date. Supplemental briefing was due. I wrote it on my calendar. Beside it, without meaning to, I wrote another date Brian had given me. The day their next mortgage payment was due. This time, there was no family promise written beside it. Martin called me before breakfast. "They've offered to dismiss with prejudice." I set down the coffee pot. "What are they asking for?" "No payment from you. No admission. Each side handles the costs we haven't otherwise resolved, subject to the court's approval of any taxable costs, and whatever narrow motion we choose to pursue." The kitchen clock clicked behind me. So they're done. They're choosing not to make the judge finish what the record is already making difficult. That's lawyer language. It's accurate language. I drove to his office with the revised draft disposition waiting in my email. Martin had marked 3 paragraphs and crossed out 2 lines his opposing counsel had tried to add about mutual misunderstandings. "I'm not signing anything that suggests I misunderstood a promise I never made," I said. "You won't, and no confidentiality clause that stops me from answering family members who already heard their version. Also removed." He slid the final draft across the table. Brian and Vanessa would dismiss the claim with prejudice. I would pay no settlement principal. I would admit no promise. The case would not be refiled on the same claim. I signed. The pen made a faint scratch across the paper. That sound should have felt larger after months of depositions, subpoenas, hearing dates, and legal invoices thick enough to require their own drawer. Instead, it sounded like paperwork. Martin took the document back. One more decision. Costs. And possibly a narrow sanctions motion tied to the sworn factual certification and what Brian admitted he knew about the text context. I am not promising attorney fees. I am not promising the judge grants anything. How much are we talking about? Enough to matter. Not enough to turn this into another war unless you want one. I looked at the file cabinet behind him. No second war. Martin nodded. Recover what has a clean legal basis. Nothing theatrical. That was going to be my recommendation. He showed me the invoices already separated into categories. Filing costs, transcript fees, service charges, attorney time that might never be recoverable. There was no giant number circled in red. No fantasy where Brian and Vanessa paid me back for every sleepless night. That helped. I could live with a result that stayed inside the law. By then, Brian and Vanessa had missed more than one comfortable month financially, even if the servicer had not yet taken any dramatic step. The house went on the market 2 weeks after the dismissal documents were signed. I did not hear that from the lender, Brian told me. His message was short. We listed today. No request attached. I opened the listing online that night. The photographs were bright enough to make the place look untouched by the people living inside it. White kitchen, polished counters, tall windows, a staged bowl of lemons on the island. The same house Brian had once described as proof they were finally moving forward now appeared under a price tag and a paragraph about motivated sellers. The dining room photograph caught me longest. I had sat there once, months before the lawsuit, when Brian still talked about the house like it was an accomplishment instead of a burden. Vanessa had served wine and explained which wall they planned to open before winter. Looking at the listing now, that wall was still there. Nothing had been changed. They had spent so much effort defending the future of the house that they had barely lived in it. Diane called after seeing it. I suppose saying "I told you so" would be ugly. Yes. So, I'll say nothing. You've been talking for 40 seconds. That's me saying nothing. I almost laughed. Then she asked, "Are you going to help him?" "With what?" "With the house." "No." She went quiet. This time, she did not argue. Word of the hearing had traveled through the family more slowly than the original accusations had. Paul called first. "Pat, I owe you an apology. You don't owe me a speech. I should have asked what the whole message said." "Yes." He waited for me to soften it. I did not. A day later, my aunt sent a text saying she was sorry for repeating Vanessa's version. Another relative who had once asked why I was letting my son lose his home now asked whether there was any way I could fix things with Brian. I typed 3 answers before deleting all of them. Finally, I sent one sentence. "That part isn't about money anymore." The listing stayed active. Brian reduced the price once. Then again, I learned about the second reduction when he called from his car. "We got an offer." "Good. When give you. Thanks for watching. When give you maying." "It's low." "How low?" He told me. "Not disastrous. Not what they wanted. Enough that after costs, mortgage payoff, and the money already burned keeping the place afloat, the result would be nothing like the equity story Vanessa had once modeled." "What does your broker say?" "Take it." "What does Vanessa say?" A pause. "She wants to wait." "Can you?" "No." That answer was cleaner than most things Brian had said all year. He asked, "What would you do? Do you want an answer or money?" "An answer." "Then stop pricing the house based on what you hoped it would become. Price it based on what it costs you every month to keep proving you were right." Brian breathed through his nose. "That sounds like something you'd say about a failing job site." "It is." He ended the call with, "I'll talk to the broker." 3 days later, Vanessa called me herself. I almost let it go to voicemail. "Patrick," she said when I answered, "Brian is accepting an offer that leaves us with almost nothing." "Then discuss it with Brian. He listens to you when it's convenient. He sued me when it was convenient." Her voice sharpened. "You think you're above this because the case fell apart. No, you still have your house, your accounts, your business income. We lose ours, and you get to call it consequences. You bought a house you couldn't comfortably carry, with support we expected. We have already had that argument in front of a judge." She was silent for a second. Then she said, "Brian is acting like I did this to him. You'll have to discuss that with your husband. Your son wanted the money too." "I know." That answer stopped her. Vanessa had been ready to defend herself against blame. She had not been ready for me to agree with the part that implicated Brian. She lowered her voice. "He told me to make you take us seriously. I know that too. And now he gets to stand there like he was tricked." I haven't said he was tricked. For the first time since I had known her, Vanessa had nothing polished to send back. She disconnected. A week later, Brian told me Vanessa had moved into a furnished apartment closer to her office while they figured out what came next. Temporary? I asked. That's what she says. I did not ask whether he believed her. He also told me they had accepted the lower offer. The closing was scheduled after the buyer's financing and inspections cleared. I was not there. I had no reason to be. Brian told me later that he and Vanessa sat on opposite sides of the title company table. The closer moved documents between them, while a printer hummed behind a glass partition. When it came time to sign the sale papers, Brian said he stared at the pen longer than he should have. The closer asked if I needed a minute, he told me. What did you say? I said no. Then he signed. The house that had started the lawsuit no longer belonged to them. That evening, my doorbell rang. Brian stood outside holding a thin folder. He came into the kitchen without taking off his coat. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he placed a copy of the accepted sale documents on the table. It's done, he said. I looked at the folder but did not touch it. Brian pulled out the chair across from me. When this is over, he said, do I still have a father? The refrigerator kicked on behind us. I heard the motor settle into its low hum. Brian waited, and for the first time since he had handed me those mortgage papers, what he wanted from me had nothing to do with a dollar amount. Brian's question stayed between us. When this is over, do I still have a father? I looked at the sale papers on my kitchen table. The folder was thin now. No mortgage packet. No complaint. No $600,000 demand. Just proof that the house was gone. You have a father, I said. Brian's shoulders dropped a little. Then I added, that doesn't mean you have an open account. He looked at me. I wasn't asking for money. Not tonight. The words landed harder than I intended, but neither of us took them back. Brian folded his hands. Vanessa and I are separating. I figured. She already has a lawyer for the divorce. That doesn't mean it will be finished quickly. I know. He gave a short laugh. I've learned lawyers don't do anything quickly. That isn't what you learned. His mouth tightened. We sat without speaking for a while. Outside, tires moved over wet pavement. Somewhere down the block, a garage door rattled shut. Brian finally said, I keep trying to decide when I should have stopped. I knew what he meant. The mortgage papers, the complaint, the deposition, the hearing. There had been plenty of exits. You want me to pick one? I asked. No. Good. He looked down. I think the diner. I remembered the untouched coffee. The screenshot between us. My offer to stop the case before it swallowed what was left of us. You could have stopped there, I said. I know. But you could have stopped before that too. I know. No excuse followed. That was new. Over the next several weeks, Brian moved into a small furnished place, while he and Vanessa's attorneys began sorting out the separation. There was no instant divorce, no dramatic courtroom fight over furniture. They had no children, which made some parts simpler, but the money was still tangled. The house sale had closed. The lawsuit was dismissed. Legal bills remained. The LLC belonged to Vanessa under the structure she had created, and her attorney would argue about what was separate, what was marital, and what obligations touched both of them. I stayed out of it. When Brian called to complain about a document request from Vanessa's lawyer, I stopped him. Talk to your attorney. You could at least tell me if it sounds reasonable. No. You used to read every contract I signed. And look where that got us. He went quiet. I'm not your lawyer, Brian. I know. Then use the one you're paying. That became my answer more often than he liked. Not cruel, not warm, just consistent. Vanessa called me once during that period. I assume Brian is telling you I planned all of this, she said. I don't discuss his divorce with him. That's convenient. You've used that word before. She exhaled. The LLC was mine because I built it. The contingency language was there because marriages fail. That doesn't mean I married him planning to leave. I've never said it did. You think I'm the villain anyway? I looked at the stack of consulting drawings on my desk. I think you planned to use money from me whether I agreed or fought you. That's not illegal. No. And Brian wanted you to pay. Yes. Another pause. She had called expecting an argument that would let her push all the blame back onto him. I did not give her one. You're not going to defend your son? Vanessa asked. Not from what he chose. Her voice flattened. So that's it? That's it. She ended the call. Martin eventually told me the narrow costs issue had been resolved without another spectacle. Some recoverable costs were addressed. There was no giant award, no public humiliation ceremony, no criminal case. I preferred it that way. The lawsuit had already done enough. The people who mattered knew why it failed. More important, Brian knew. One Saturday afternoon, he came over carrying a manila folder. The first thing I noticed was how carefully he set it on the table. Not pushed toward me. Set down. I found an apartment, he said. Good. Closer to work. That'll save you some driving. He opened the folder. Application. Lease estimate. Moving costs. Then he slid one page toward me. My eyes went to the security deposit. A few $1,000s. After everything, the number was almost insulting in its smallness. Brian rubbed his thumb along the paper's edge. I'm short until my next commission clears. There it was. The old pattern had returned wearing cheaper clothes. He did not demand. He did not mention family. He did not tell me what Ellen would have wanted. That made it harder. Are you asking me to cover it? I said. Brian looked at the table. Yes. I leaned back. For years, this was the moment where I stepped in. A car repair, a tax surprise, a rough quarter, something temporary, something fixable. I had always told myself I was helping him get back on his feet. Maybe sometimes I had. Maybe sometimes I had taught him that the ground under his feet belonged to me. Brian waited. I pushed the folder back. No. He swallowed. I figured, then why ask? Because I hoped I was wrong. The answer was quiet enough that I almost missed it. He closed the folder. You're really going to let me lose the apartment over a deposit? You have a job. My commission won't clear in time. Then find a cheaper place. Ask for a later move-in date. Use a short-term rental. Sell something. Call the property manager and negotiate. His eyebrows pulled together. That's your advice? That's adulthood. Brian gave a bitter laugh. You make everything sound like a bid problem. No. A bid problem has somebody else paying you. He looked toward the kitchen window. For a moment, I saw the old Brian again, the boy who could turn stubborn silence into a weapon until Ellen or I filled the gap for him. I let the silence stay empty. Finally, he asked, You won't even loan it to me? No. What if I sign something? I looked at him. That stopped us both. Brian's mouth twisted. Okay. Bad choice of words. Very. He gathered the papers. At the door, he paused. Dad? Yes? I'm sorry. No speech followed. No explanation. Just those two words. I nodded once. I heard you. He waited, maybe for forgiveness to arrive in a sentence large enough to erase the year. It didn't, but I opened the door for him. 2 weeks later, Brian called. I got the apartment. How? Property manager let me split the deposit. I sold the golf clubs, picked up an extra sales weekend. Good. That's all you're going to say? What do you want me to say? He was quiet. Then he laughed. A real one this time. Nothing, I guess. A month later, he came by with 2 cardboard boxes in the back seat of his car. What's that? I asked. Stuff from the house I didn't want in storage. Inside one box were framed photographs, old Christmas ornaments, and a chipped ceramic bowl Ellen had used for keys by the front door. Brian picked it up. Mom hated this thing. She bought it. She still hated it. That was true. He smiled, then set it on my counter. I thought you should have it. Why? Because I don't have a front table yet. The answer was so ordinary that I almost missed what had changed. He was not asking me to solve that either. We carried the boxes inside. No speeches. No promise that everything was fixed. At the door, Brian said, I'll come back for the photos after I get shelves. Fine. And Dad? Yes? I'm still paying the costs the court ordered me to cover. I know. He nodded. No complaint. After he left, I stood in the kitchen, where the mortgage papers had started all of it. The table was empty. Brian had lost the house. Vanessa had lost the plan that depended on my money and a marriage she thought she could financially separate from if she ever needed to. I had kept my $600,000, but that was never the part I wanted back. Trust does not return because a judge asks the right question. It comes back in smaller things. A son solving his own deposit. A father answering the phone without reaching for his checkbook. A chipped bowl sitting on a counter because somebody finally carried something home without asking what it was worth. For now, that was enough. What this story leaves you with is not a lesson about winning a lawsuit or protecting $600,000. It is a lesson about the difference between helping your family and teaching them that your resources belong to them. You can love your children deeply and still refuse to finance decisions you did not make. You can care about their marriage, their home, and their future without accepting responsibility for debts they chose to take on. A boundary does not become selfish simply because someone is disappointed by it. You should also pay attention to what happens when family expectations are allowed to replace clear agreements. A parent may say, "I'll always help you," and mean emotional support, emergency assistance, or reasonable help when circumstances require it. Another person may hear those words and gradually turn them into an entitlement. That is why large financial arrangements inside families should be discussed plainly. If money is a gift, say it is a gift. If it is a loan, put the terms in writing. If no promise has been made, do not let guilt, pressure, or selective quotations manufacture one afterward. There is another important lesson in Brian's choices. Being influenced by a spouse does not remove responsibility for what you knowingly sign, say, or swear to. Brian eventually discovered that Vanessa had financial plans he did not fully understand, but that discovery could not erase his own decision to participate in the lawsuit. When you make a serious choice because someone close to you is pushing you, you still have to ask yourself whether you could defend that choice if that person were no longer standing beside you. If the answer is no, that is a warning worth hearing before the damage is done. Patrick's response also shows why consequences can sometimes teach what repeated rescue never does. Refusing the apartment deposit was not about enjoying Brian's struggle. Brian had a job, options, possessions he could sell, and people he could negotiate with. Once his father stopped automatically solving the problem, Brian found a way to solve it himself. That is practical independence. Helping someone should increase their ability to stand on their own, not make your wallet the first solution they reach for whenever life becomes uncomfortable. At the same time, boundaries do not require permanent hatred. You can refuse money and still answer the phone. You can accept an apology without pretending the betrayal never happened. You can leave the door open to rebuilding trust while requiring different behavior before that trust returns. Forgiveness and financial access are not the same thing. So ask yourself what you would have done at that kitchen table. If your adult child handed you a mortgage and said it was your responsibility because you had enough savings, would you refuse immediately, or would guilt make you hesitate? If that child later apologized after the damage was done, what would you need to see before trusting them again? And if you have ever had to choose between rescuing someone you love and allowing them to face the consequences of their own decisions, what did that experience teach you? Sometimes the most responsible form of family support is not another check. Sometimes it is a clear no, followed by enough love to let the other person learn what they can carry on their own.